What's going on, guys? Welcome to episode 85 here on the Proven Knowledge Podcast. This is the Creator Series. Today I talked to a Queens native. He's actually good friends with Dre A.M, who we interviewed last month. It's his producer, Kosher Nostra. We talked today about his journey from going to the military, and he actually kind of picked up making beats around that time. He talks about transitioning from using the MPC over to using FL Studio, and we talked about why he chose FL over the other DAWs. We also talked about sample chopping and sample creation, which is always a hot topic amongst producers because there's a lot of different viewpoints, especially nowadays with sample clearances and the way people use loops and everything. And I liked his take on it, which you'll hear in the episode. And overall, I really just enjoy the fact that he's really just putting the music first. He talks about the fact that he doesn't really care about, whatever financial gain he gets from it or anything. He's really just locked in and focused on working with Dre at the moment, just to really make some great memorable music. And I think that's how you see success overall when you're working with the people closest to you and that you're trying to build with, and you're really just focused on the output over the outcome. So I really appreciate him for his time. This is a fairly short episode. This was like a rapid fire one, but I hope you guys enjoy it. And without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome, everyone, to episode 85 here on the Proven Knowledge Podcast. This is the Creator Series. Today we have a really incredible producer. Me and this guy actually just linked up, I think, like in the last couple weeks. He's out of Queens. He's good friends with Dre A.M, who we just had on the show. Kosher Nostra is here. How are you, man?
What's up, man? How's it going?
Going great, man. Like I said, glad that, we got in touch literally in the last, week or so, really, because I, seen you supporting what I'm doing and everything, and I know you're working with Dre really heavy, and I'm excited to get you on here and, get to know a little bit more about you. So to start every episode off, we have the guests just give a little bit of background. How long have you been doing music? How did you get into it? And pretty much basic information for those that might not know you and what you do.
Yeah, so I was in the Army back in the day. I'm actually 41, so people don't realize that. So I was in the Army back in the day, and we used to, freestyle in the barracks. We had a cipher going, pretty much every night we'd be drinking beers, ciphering and stuff. Wasn't really, my thing to be a rapper, and then I slowly kind of got into the production side of things. And then I probably really started taking it seriously, 7 years ago, maybe 6 years ago. Banging out beats. I used to have an MPC 2500, which is the main thing I started on. And I would just be banging out beats on that. And then during the pandemic, I guess last spring, I just kind of got tired of using the MPC because it's so tedious. You know what I mean? Let me move laptop, see what this is all about. Let me go DAW-based. Well, FL Studio, got a new laptop, all that stuff. And then I just been since then, been taking it very seriously. Before that, it was just beat tapes here and there, doing the whole Bandcamp thing. You know what I mean? Not really linking with artists, not even really trying to, just doing shit for myself, putting things on Bandcamp, trying to get a few streams here and there. And the pandemic, I was I actually got something going here, probably, you know what I mean, and see what I could do.
It's crazy because I talked to a lot of people about the pandemic, on the last several episodes, really for the last year, because it's already been almost 2 years since that happened. It's crazy to think of all the free time that you had to be able to just sit down with your life and be let me reevaluate some things. Let me kind of try to move this in a different direction or try this new thing. So it sounds like for you, that was music. It was music had always kind of been there, at least for the last several years. And then you were let me just focus on it and kind of get a good direction going with it for this time. But
yeah, 100%, man, 100%. Especially making the move off the MPC into DAW-based, it just it opens up so many worlds that you don't realize you have when you're in that box. You know what I mean? MPCs are dope as fuck to learn on, but I just feel 2021, unless you came up with the MPC for old school stuff, you could do all this in the laptop. And you got so many options. I just feel shit on the laptop. It is what it is now.
Yeah. Now, you said you were doing this in the military, that's kind of where it started, but were you doing this as a kid too, coming up, were you listening to a lot of hip-hop, or were you into it, and were you kind of dabbling in production and things like that, or it didn't really start till later?
Nah, not at all. When I was a teenager, I first got into, punk and hardcore music and a little bit of metal music, and then there was this kid who lived down the block who was, the dude supplying us with weed and everything. I was a pothead back in the day, and he had Cypress Hill stuff. I'm talking, this is 95, you know what I mean? It wasn't that easy to stuff back then, and he had like the Cypress Hill joints, like all that stuff. I'm like, yo, what the fuck is this? You know, like I started getting into that, and it kind of just grew from there. I've always been like multi-genre in terms of my interests, like big into hip hop, punk and hardcore, that kind of stuff, even like techno, that kind of stuff, like all music in general.
Yeah. So how does the creation process usually begin for you as far as like making a beat, or just kind of if you have an artist in the room and they give you an idea, how does that really go for you? Are you just starting with drums, or you're finding a sample to chop it up and see what you can do, or does it not really matter? It kind of just goes based on the day and how you're feeling.
I feel like I'll hear a sample that I want to use, and then like I just started envisioning it in my head. Like I can hear a whole track, and then like I'll hear like one little piece of something, and I'm like, nah, this is it. And I'm just thinking about what I'm gonna do with that one little piece, or even if it's a big piece. And I start building a beat in my head, and then I'll load up the sample. Maybe add drums next. Sometimes drums first before I even load up the sample, but usually sample first, load up the drums, and I just take it from there. Usually the bass line's like the last thing for me, though.
Yeah. I feel like the people that start with drums, that's like a skill I probably could never have. Like, I don't know how people can start with the drums and then build the melody around it. It's like there's something about the music itself that kind of carries the whole thing. Then you can kind of give it the swing. But it's really just everybody kind of does their own thing, and they have their own methods. I'm always curious to know, like, how it goes for certain people and everything, for sure. So, you know, we said you're near Queens. I think you said you're in Manhattan. You're kind of on the other side of the city or whatever. So now, as far as like New York hip hop, like we know New York is like the birthplace of hip hop, right? So it's kind of evolved over the years. So where do you think it kind of stands now as far as how people, like how many upcoming artists are coming out of New York? Like, are you working with some of these people that are coming out? Like, do you see the music scene kind of taking off over there more and more and just kind of changing? Or how do you think that's all going to go, especially as we move into this new decade again?
I think New York is coming back very hard. I mean, not even just New York City, because you have like Griselda, who's way upstate in Buffalo. They started doing their thing a few years ago. Their shit is like a throwback to like my teenage years almost, you know what I mean? You got so many crazy artists all over the city right now doing like a lot of, I guess you would call it alternative or experimental style hip hop, which is like dope as fuck, because I feel like the 90s boom bap style, like unless you're doing it like crazy like Griselda's doing it, like it's played out in the sense like people have been there, they've done that. Like you could use those. You should be bringing modern elements into it. But I think New York is coming back hard, and like the stuff Dre A.M and I are doing right now, it's crazy. We just dropped a single. We're working on a full-length album, which should be coming out next year, and I think it's gonna blow people's heads off. Just like production, the raps, everything about it is crazy, original stuff people really haven't heard before. So
I know you mentioned that you were in FL mostly. So what exactly led you to choose that DAW over the other ones?
I don't know, man, to be honest, I was doing a whole, all right, let's move away from the MPC, let's go into the laptop, like I said before. I'm, on these websites, which DAW is the best. I'm sure you've seen, Pro Tools, FL Studio, Ableton, blah, 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 and, something just the way FL Studio looked, I was like, I can mess with this, you know what I mean? It seemed very straightforward, very simple, everything's right in front of you, you know what you gotta do. And I've never even used Ableton, so I can't even comment on it. I've been with FL for, I guess 2 years now, and I love it, so.
People always give me shit because I used FL. It always gets, I don't know, a lot of people don't enjoy it or whatever. They're always, Ableton or Pro Tools or Logic or whatever, but I think you're right. It's, it just looks cool, you know what I mean? Something about being in there, the interface, the colors and everything, and the way you can really just get ideas off pretty quickly. I feel just like you, I never used Ableton or anything, but I've seen people use it, and it just looks like there's too much going on for me. I feel like when you have a full session and maybe you're recording people in it, it might be cool to use and kind of put everything together. But as far as making ideas on the spot, quick, I think FL's the way to go, because it just has the grid. You got your sounds, and you just pull your plugins wherever you want, and you're good to go. But I think you're probably the oldest person I've ever seen on FL. So.
I mean, you got to make that transition. And like I said, we have so much technology available to us. I think
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, I hope one day, like, because there's a lot of producers that use FL, and like a lot of the most successful producers now are on FL. So hopefully one day it stops getting the bad rap that it got early on. But definitely interesting to talk about. So you mentioned like a lot of different genres you were influenced by coming up. So, like, what bands or what artists were really heavy for you when you were a kid, or maybe even up to nowadays? Has your listening kind of changed over the years? Like, who you've been checking out? Are you always looking for new artists, or do you still listen to a lot of the same people you used to?
I mean, I'm always going to listen to new music. I feel like I always had to talk to my friends about this. Like, you can't limit yourself to, like, I'm in the 2000s, I'm in the 90s, I'm in the 2010s. Like, music's always evolving. There's so much great shit. Like I said, the first hip-hop I was really into was definitely Cypress Hill, then probably Mobb Deep, you know what I mean? Those are, like, I'm a big DJ Muggs fan, love Soul Assassins, all about them. Yeah, just, like, everything about those two groups from back in the day. Nowadays, there's, like, so much amazing music coming out, like Akai Solo from Brooklyn. I'm a big fan of his. Billy Woods, obviously Alchemist is still doing his thing. Makami just dropped the album last night. I think his shit is great too. And I just love how like styles are evolving. In terms of like punk music, back in the day, probably a lot of like early like UK punk, like, you know, like the Staples, Sex Pistols, all that kind of stuff. And then slowly evolved into like probably harder stuff like thrash metal, that kind of stuff. New York had a big back in the day with like hardcore bands, and you probably haven't heard of a lot of them, like Madball, Agnostic Front. Those type of bands are a huge influence on my lifestyle and just me in general, like as a human being, up with those kind of groups. And even musically, probably, like I feel like I sample different things than other people would, just because I might have come up with different music than other people did, you know?
Out of all those people, or maybe someone else, is there ever like a dream collab? Like, if you could work with them, you would love to do a song with them, or not?
Nah, not really. I mean, right now my dream is what I'm working on, you know what I mean?
I mean, that's always the best, though, like, because I know a lot of people, especially like younger people, I think they like to aim high for the higher artists or the people that they listen to. They're always like, I want to work with like Drake, or I want to work with like Kanye or whatever, all these people. But it's like, I think when you build it from the ground up with the people you're already working with, that's when it goes as good as it can go, you know what I mean? And then you're actually going to get where you want to be eventually. It's going to take a lot of years and a lot of time to build it up. But I think like the journey is really what it's all about, and just kind of starting from the ground up, building it to what it ends up becoming. Because like Drake, for example, like same thing. He started with just his friends, you know what I mean? And they have built it up slowly over the years into what it is now. So it's like, I don't see why you wouldn't want to do that. But like we said, all different preferences, all different people and what they do and everything. So you mentioned about sampling, because I know that's a huge part of hip hop. It's a huge part of the origins of hip hop and everything. But now obviously a lot of people are doing like the splice samples and the loops and stuff like that. So how do you view that whole thing? Are you you're still gonna go for picking out an old record and sampling that, or you don't really care where the sample comes from? Because there's been like a lot of things about clearances and all this stuff. Like, do you not pay attention to that? Do you just kind of let the music do its thing and work out the rest later? Like, how do you view all that?
I'm gonna sample from anything. If I hear something and it's to my ear it's dope, or I envision myself doing something with it, I'm using it. You know what I mean? Whether it's vinyl, whether it's something on YouTube, whatever it may be. I've done whatever they call it, like street sampling, like sampling people in the street, and I've used that in tracks, you know what I mean? And in terms of clearances, like, I just hope I'm mangling it enough that it's not getting called out. You're like chopping it up, pitch changing, tempo changing, whatever it may be. I just hope to not get called out. Like, it's, you know, like, we're in a gen, like, everybody has been sampling for 40 years. Like, these old record labels are still going to come after us. It's ridiculous, you know what I mean? In many cases, we're making songs, we're remaking stuff, completely new songs. You can't even tell it's that, so why are they coming after us, you know what I mean? If you're straight ripping something, I kind of get it, but if you're, like, mangling the sample, like, who gives a shit, you know? song at that point.
I feel like that's like the whole art of it anyways. You're not supposed to just take it and just like loop it up. Like you got to get a little creative with it. Like you got to chop it up and rearrange it and kind of mess with it and make something completely new. I think that's the whole point, but it's like there's just a lot of different things and like ways people view it, and I always see these arguments about like even now with like Splice, because I guess Splice has a ton of issues with people aren't getting paid correctly, or they're putting things out for free and then they expect to get paid when the record gets placed or whatever. So it's like even that is now causing issues. So I agree with you. I think it's like you really just got to sit down and make the music first, and then whatever happens happens. You know what I mean? Like if you're more output over the outcome, I think that's how you win, because you're just going in and you're making what you feel in the moment. So I think that's what it's all about at the end of the day. But
I asked my boy about it, who's also a producer, like a couple years ago. I was like, yo, have you ever been called out? He's like, yo, nobody's coming after us, like on our level. You know what I mean? Nobody's coming. Nobody even knows we exist up at like Capitol Records, for instance. I mean, sometimes instead of sampling, I will use a hardware synth that I have, though, to make melodies on that, you know, depending on the day. But it's usually sampling, and like I just said, I just hope to not get caught. And if I do, oh well. To me, it's going to bring notoriety to myself if I get caught, because I'm going to blow you up on my Instagram page.
And if the song is great, it's like the song's great, it'll live on anyway. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think listeners are really caring what's happening behind the scenes. If they like the song, they're gonna mess with it. So obviously, you know, you work with Dre, you're working with him a lot right now, and you said you're working on some upcoming stuff. Is there anybody else that we should know about that you're kind of plotting with behind the scenes? Like maybe could be another producer, could be another artist. Like who else should we be on the lookout for that you're currently working with?
Nah, right now we're just all in with each other, working together. We're like literally both of us are like every day. If we're not recording something, if I'm not sending him beats or he's not sending me verses back to the beats, then we're talking about promo stuff. We're constantly talking about music in some fashion. There's always something going on with that.
Mm-hmm. So
pretty much 20.
So what's his process like? Because I know from what he told me on the episode that we did, what his like whole songwriting process is like. But from your perspective, you know, you're the producer and everything, so you get kind of a different look at how he does it. So what is it like working with him?
I'll tell you what, it's like the easiest work I've ever done in my life, because so we met on Instagram, same type of way we met, you know what I mean, just talking back, and then we're like, yo, let's meet up, almost like in a way like a business meeting, play him some beats, talk about music, whatever, and then like a day or two later, he was like, yo, I've got this concept album, and I've never produced an album. I was like, fuck it, I'll produce the whole thing, let's work, like I'm hungry, he's hungry, you know what I mean, and I sent him like pretty much like a beat pack, like these are some beats that I made, they might fit in, and like not even the next day, probably like an hour later, this dude had a demo back to me on one of the beats, just like recorded over his phone, and this guy works quick, like I can fuck with this, like let's go. I mean, and from that on, I just had a positive feeling, and like he likes almost everything I send him, I love almost everything he sends me, and it's just like a great working relationship.
Yeah. And if you guys are only a few months in, like imagine in like a year how good it's going to be. Like you guys might have like hundreds of songs just ready to go. Just keep putting them out and everything. So I think that's the best type of relationships to have with artists. So that's great.
Yeah, working with him. I don't even want to work with anyone else right now because this is going so well. Mm-hmm. But even if I wanted to, there would be no time to. Like I said, it's 24/7 doing this.
Yeah.
My wife's probably not happy about it, but she supports.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great stuff, man. So obviously 2022 is right here. It's basically here already. What do you think you want your biggest accomplishment to be in 2022?
Definitely this album release. That's huge, you know what I mean? And to see it pop off, you know what I mean? Like, regardless of financially, because we know how streaming services are, like, whatever. But just to see it pop off, see the fan base grow, you know what I mean? Like, get recognized for the talent, like that's pretty much it, dude. Like, to me, it's all about the art. Of course, finances are a factor, but it's all about the art to me. Like, just people enjoy the music, people respect it, people want to hear more.
So I don't know if you ever thought of this question, but what do you think with music you want your lasting impact to be? Like when people hear a production of yours or a song that you did, what do you think you want them to take away from that?
I want to be like known as like this is this dude's style. Like people might be like, I hear the influence of this guy or that guy. You know what I mean? Like you're always gonna be influenced indirectly in some way, but definitely like this is. I hear this dude's beat. It's his style. I always know it's his. There's no like type beat type thing going on where it's like, oh, he made a Griselda type beat or he made a whatever type beat, Metro Boomin type beat. You know what I mean? Like you hear it, it's my beat, and then people my type beats. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you gotta always want that signature sound. I think that's what will set you apart. So, yeah, that's great. So, these are the last few questions. I usually ask these on every episode. So, if you could go back 10 years ago, maybe give yourself a piece of advice, or maybe not change anything at all, what do you think you would do?
Definitely have more confidence in yourself starting out. Like I'm sure everybody goes through it. You start out doing this, you're like, I don't really have confidence. Maybe my shit is garbage. You know what I mean? Like you're hesitant to stuff out there. What else did I say? Yeah, mainly just be confident in yourself and don't be scared to stuff out there. Oh, and don't be chasing major artists around. Like I think you touched on that earlier. Like it's better to build from the ground up with somebody, to link with somebody or a group of people that you vibe with, and you create your own thing. Because you're constantly trying to chase these major artists for placement. Like, how are you going to win? You have people sending them free beat packs, but you're reaching out to them like, yo, pay me $200 for this beat. It's never going to happen.
Exactly. Very well said. So let's flip it then. Let's say 10 years from now, where do you think you want to be in your career and in your life?
In life, I'm happy in life. In terms of career, just more established, more well-known, respected for the music. And like regardless of finances, just building, constantly building, like still working, like every day working on music, almost like a 24/7 career, you know what I mean?
So do you have any final words of wisdom today for the listeners?
Words of wisdom, like I just said, don't be chasing the major artists when you're new, because you're just climbing uphill. It's like a Sisyphusian thing. And create your own sound, just do your own thing. If it sounds good to you and it doesn't sound like anyone else's stuff, then it's great. And just be confident in it and push it.
Well, man, that's all I have for you today. That was like a rapid fire. You stormed through those pretty quick, and I appreciate your time, man. I'm looking forward to all the music you and Dre have coming out. I'm looking forward to that new album and everything. And I wish you all the best of luck moving forward, man, because you got a great talent just from hearing all your productions so far. So keep it up, bro.
All right. Talk to you soon, man.
Thanks, guys, for listening today. That was episode 85. We'll be back this time next week. As always, hit the support button on your podcast streaming platform if you'd like to send any funds. Feel free to leave us that 5-star rating if you enjoyed today's episode. So we'll see you then. Thanks, everyone.